Unless they give Dr. Afra a tremendous amount of support in this set, Dr. Afra is going to be the worst leader in the game.
She has no support. Nothing works with her. She's just as bad as Finn.
I mean, look at her. Like her ability is just hot garbage. Discard a card from your deck. How is that good?
Is she there now? No, she's not. There's just not enough, especially in this color.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Take the Initiative. Today, we got a deck profile here. This is Afra, probably the most underrated leader in the game at this time. Lots of people are putting her in F tier, D tier, saying she's the worst in the game. Nothing could be further from the truth. This deck is really, really good. And it's for the simple reason that Afra lets you get to 0 cards in your deck really, really fast and lets you do cool restock loops to basically do whatever you want. And this deck is actually really, really strong. So we're gonna go over it today, go over the matchups, some of the other things with the deck, how to play it. It can be kind of expensive. There are a couple legendaries in it, mostly set 1 legendaries. I don't think any of these are set 2 legendaries, but you are going to need Avengers, Vigilances, Super Laser Blasts. That's pretty much unavoidable. I guess theoretically you could play it without Avenger, but I think you really need Super Laser Blast and Vigilance to make this work. So basically, the goal of this deck is to get to 0 cards in your deck really, really quickly. And Afra can do that. You're also running lots of stuff that lets you get card advantage while you're on the way. So Dr. Pershing and Mining Guild TIE Fighter both do that. And the rest of the deck is basically Control Cell. It works a lot like the Boba Blue deck from set 1 did. That one was, I don't know how popular it got, but it did well at some things. It was mainly played by control buffs, but it worked really well. And this deck basically, Afra lets you get to the end game much quicker than Boba. I think there's debate about if you want Boba or Afra in terms of stats, but I think Afra really wins that debate just because of the mill thing. So Afra's ability is, on her flip side is not necessarily that impactful. You get 1 card back, and sometimes that's really helpful. Sometimes that is actually really, really helpful into aggro decks, especially being able to get back your core removal pieces. Sometimes she comes out at 2/5, sometimes a 5/5 against aggro. Usually against the non-aggro decks, you'll wait and make her a 5/5. Sometimes you won't even really deploy her ever because you just want to be milling. But if you need to get threats off the board, she can help do that. But yeah, the main reason we play her is to mill ourselves and then get into the restock loop territory. So the control cards, so the other core pieces that win con are restock, vigilance, and avenger. Restocking vigilance over and over again lets you mill your opponent out. You do have to be careful in the end games with Afra because her mill effect is always active. So the top card of your deck is going to get discarded. That does happen before you draw cards, remember. And restock puts stuff in a random order. So if you go if you only have 1 restock that you're looping, there's a chance that you get it milled. So that's why I'm on 3, because you pretty much always want to be having at least 2 in your hand so you can play 1, and then if that one gets milled, then you play the other and get the other the other 2 back in rotation. So then the odds you never want to put yourself in a position where your only copies of restock that are in rotation are in your deck. Sometimes that's unavoidable, but generally speaking, you want to be looping at least 2 of these with each other to minimize the chances that they get milled. You also sometimes your opponents are playing stuff that mills you, especially vigilance. There aren't many other cards that mill you. Sometimes Force Stroke can force you to draw. Sometimes that hurts, but mainly you don't want to set your opponent up for a vigilance. You at least want to be very wary of that. But yeah, so that's basically the end game. Is you restock loop with vigilances. Sometimes you can just take control of the game with an Avenger or just your other stuff. But yeah, so then we're also running a lot of removal. Like we got the Rivals Falls, Super Laser Blast, Rivals Fall. I'm between Rivals Fall and Vanquish. I think Rivals Fall is better just because so many people are running like leaders that you put upgrades on, and Vanquish can't take that out. So yeah, like, so I would consider Vanquishes, but I think Rivals Falls is better. Being able to play it on 5 is also sometimes relevant, but not often. And being able to play it 4 or 5 is also relevant often. Fennec is really good. She's like, and she's also like a 7 cost, which is just like another thing for Afra. She deals with almost any unit in the game. Like if you're, especially because Afra's milling stuff. So if you can get to like 5, she can do 9 on an ambush. If you can get 6 different costs, she can take out like Crate Dragon. I think that's literally basically anything that doesn't account for upgrades. But yeah, so she's really good. I have the 3rd one on the sideboard. I don't know if I'd ever want the 3rd one. I think 2 is fine. You'd maybe cut Fennec if you were wanting other stuff, but I think she's really good. Bounty Hunter Crew lets you get back your restocks and vigilances if you mill them. And he's just like, he can just return, key events at any time also. So Bounty Hunter Crew is good. I would consider running a 3rd in the main deck, but you don't always need it in the aggro matchups. Bosk is just like really good generally as like a guy that can come in and take out your opponent's units. Sometimes he's not super usable, but I like him in there. 3 Takedown. I'm not a big fan of this card, but in this meta, I think it makes sense, especially like early on. It's just a generically useful card, and it can take out a lot of things. Vigilance, we talked about that. Client has been good for me, but sometimes he's not good. Basically, heal 5 is big, but if it gives your opponent a chance to activate the unit, it's really more like heal 2. Because if you're going to kill that unit anyway, like, you're not gaining a ton by clienting. But sometimes you get into states where you have control of the board and you have a client ready. So your opponent plays a unit exhausted, you client it, and then you kill it, and then you're healing 5 without giving it a chance to attack. And that, it can really help you stabilize. So I don't think I'd run 3 of this, but 2 of it is fine. Make an opening. This has been in and out. It's mainly there for the aggro decks, and there's like a lot of people that I ran into on Karabas that are playing like Death Star Stormtroopers and stuff and whatever decks, and so this helps you clear those. Power of the Dark Side, obviously really good, pretty much essential. Cloud Rider is like, it answers basically any turn 1 threat on the ground, which is good for Bazine. Bazine is really, really good. Most of the time I'm not playing her on turn 1. I'm just putting her into the Smuggle realm for whenever, because she's basically like Spark Rebellion, except she comes out of your resource row, so she doesn't cost you card advantage. Sometimes you will play her turn 1 if she's your only option, or if there's like a deck that you really need to get rid of a specific turn 1 card for. Like, let's say you're playing an aggro deck and you don't have an answer to Wing Leader, so you just Bazine and try and get their Wing Leader, and that works sometimes. We talked about Pershing. 2 No Good to Me Dead. This is another card that I'm not sure about, and I'll put Entrenched with it. So Entrenched and No Good to Me Dead, I've been like considering these versus Frozen and Carbonite. Right now I don't have Frozen and Carbonite in there, but I've been playing with it. I think it's definitely worth trying out. So Entrenched is basically like a way to permanently take a unit off the board softly, and No Good to Me Dead is basically a way to take it off the board for a couple turns. Frozen and Carbonite theoretically does that also, but it's also subject to getting hit by Fang Fighters and stuff. And I think people are going to be running a lot more upgrade hate in general, just because of there's so many upgrades in Shadows of the Galaxy that are big. We got 2 Inferno 4s also as like your only space opener. This guy is, I don't like it a ton, but it works. It's also like pretty much the only thing in the deck that outs Lurking Typhanum, which is a really annoying thing that exists. I guess Entrenched does softly, but yeah. So yeah, Inferno 4 is in there. I would consider running like other 2-cost ships in that slot. But yeah, like you really want to be playing a lot of removal. You don't want a ton of units, but at the same time, you also pretty much need to have a turn 1 play in order to beat aggro. So I think like Cloud Rider against aggro generally is your best turn 1 play, and like I guess or Inferno 4. I've been playing with Mercenary Gunship also, which is like a 3/2 that you pay for 2 that can clear things like A-Wings. But yeah, Inferno 4 sometimes like is good to set up your Afra mills, but like, I mean, it's not like substantially better than just random. So, yeah, that's the main deck right now. Like all control decks, you want to evolve the list over time and in relation to what your local meta is. So if your meta isn't playing a bunch of aggro decks, you can probably cut Make It openings. Maybe you cut clients, but I think you keep clients in, just, you know, because it's sort of useful in a lot of matchups. Yeah. Sideboard right now is sort of weird. I just have basically a bunch of 1-ofs for cards that are 2-ofs in the main deck. And I also got System Patrol Craft and Spark Rebellion. Spark Rebellion is good for control mirrors to get like those super annoying cards that can get you. Bazine also does this, and I think Bazine is like slightly better because you can play her from the resource row. Generally speaking, I'm playing Bazine for 4 a lot of the times. I'm not often playing her for 2. Sometimes you can play her for 2, but I think usually I'm willing to spend the 2 to get the card advantage. Because that is really like how you're gonna win this game with this deck, is to 1-for-1 everything. Sometimes your units will 2-for-1, but you really want to be like out card advantaging them. So Bazine helps with that. Spark Rebellion is neutral on cards, although it does prevent your opponent from drawing back up. So yeah. And System Patrol Craft is just for the aggro matchups. The sideboard isn't like super well tuned, and you know, especially at this stage, I'm swapping things in and out. But this deck is really, really hard to beat. It has a tough aggro matchup, like all control decks, but the aggro matchup is winnable. Like I managed to do it. I'm probably positive into aggro decks on, you know, against randos on Karabast. So against good players, like the aggro deck is definitely, you know, favorable, especially because like they can just aggro decks have gotten a lot of new stuff in Shadows of the Galaxy, and it's hard to keep up with them. Like you have things like Cloud Rider that can answer their threats early. You can, you know, recur vigilances and stuff, but sometimes they just get out ahead of you. The other thing that this deck is really weak to is Crate Dragon in like the other control decks, because you can't really out it without taking a bunch of damage to your base, and sometimes they just can get some damage in early and then just a bunch of damage with Crate Dragon in the late game, and you just can't stop them. Like it just sucks when your only out to Crate Dragon is to play like Avenger or Super Laser Blast, and you're just taking like 8 or 9 to base, and you get to clear this one thing. So yeah, it does have weaknesses. There is a lot of counterplay to it, but against like most mid-range and like other control decks, this deck is almost unbeatable, because you just have so many ways to answer everything, and they just can't, you know, they can't beat the vigilance loops. So yeah, if you're looking for a control deck to try, go for this one. It's really, really good. I did want to talk about some like other cards that I've been, you know, toying with in this deck. Let me go and move my camera over here. So yeah, Greedo is like, you know, it mills you another one sometimes, and it's like a 3/1. Generally speaking, I like Cloud Riders better because of the ambush. And like so if you want to play 3/1, I think Cloud Riders is better, but you know, Greedo can be good. These bounties, I haven't actually tried these bounties yet, but theoretically they're both really good. Top target to heal your base, and enticing reward to pick up more removal from your deck. Both seem really, really good. Top target, I am like a bit concerned about the card advantage aspect of it, because it is like a -1 in terms of cards, and it just helps you on tempo. But like, so I probably wouldn't main deck top target ever, but I would consider putting it in the sideboard. I think it pretty much is better than recruit in repair in basically every scenario. There's some scenarios where you want repair, but yeah. Enticing reward is like basically like a +1 in terms of card advantage, just for 1 cost, which I think is really, really good. So I definitely want to try this out. Regional Governor it's just okay. We talked about Spark Rebellion also. Pike Sentinel for more 2-drops. I don't think it's as good as Cloud Riders into aggro, because this is like an aggro, like a card that you would play against aggro to sort of block some of their hits. But Sabine trades with this, Battlefield Marine trades with this, whereas like Cloud Raiders actually kills both of those things outright. So I don't think Pike Sentinel's that great in this deck, but it's, you can consider it. Val is another thing I haven't really tested yet. Like theoretically, being able to trade into 3/1s and survive is really, really good. So I think she's just good just for that purpose. I've been saying for a while that I just want a generic 2/4 for 2 with no text. And this text here is, it could punish you sometimes. It could, be, avoidable sometimes. These 3/3s, Evazan and Fugitive Wookiee, again, I think Cloud Riders is just better than them usually. But sometimes Evazan specifically, being able to trade with Battlefield Marine and survive seems really good. Fugitive Wookiee, it trades with a lot of the 2/3s. And survives. I don't think the bounty on it is particularly punishing. But yeah, I would definitely suggest giving Evazan a try. Mercenary Gunship, I have tried this one a bit. It does trade with aggro ships, but it's you really want to play it going first, because if they play it going second, they can go wing leader and then you're screwed. But yeah, just more ships is great. I don't think the ability to buy it off is super relevant. Usually if they're playing that game, you can play that game comfortably. If they decide to buy your gunship, then you can just buy it back. And you're fine going even on the tempo that way. 3-cost ships, the Seventh Fleet Defender, Lurking TIE Phantom, and Black Sun Starfighter. These all have different pros and cons. And they're all there mainly for aggro. Lurking TIE Phantom is kind of it's not necessarily there for aggro. It's more of a way to be more aggressive yourself. Seventh Fleet and Black Sun, I think, would basically be there for aggro. And the difference is Black Sun, I think, is, it is a Sentinel, so it actually blocks an attack, whereas Seventh Fleet doesn't. But Black Sun loses to Daring Raid, so if you suspect a lot of Daring Raid in your meta, then you might want to try Seventh Fleet in that slot. I don't think I have any 3-cost ships in the main deck at all right now, so it's another slot of a thing that you can play if you feel like you want a card to serve that role. System Patrolcraft, we already talked about that. It's it's a Sentinel for aggro decks. Nima Outpost Constables is also the same thing but on the ground. Sometimes it's valuable to lock up space, sometimes more valuable to lock up the ground. 2/6 versus 3/4 is also an interesting difference. 3/4 actually kills things usually, whereas 2/6 just weakens them on defense. So yeah, Fell the Dragon is another thing. I think it's just worse than Takedown, so I'm not playing it right now. But depending on the meta, what it evolves to be, you could want to play Fell the Dragon over Takedown, or maybe a split between them, or something like that. Beckett is another thing. I don't think he's quite as good as Bosk for the 5-cost unit slot. Same thing with Syndicate Lackeys. I just don't think they're, because they share that 5-cost unit slot with Bosk. I think Bosk is better. Being able to go 4/5 and survive most things. Syndicate Lackeys, depending on how the meta shakes out, I would seriously consider Syndicate Lackeys there. I don't think I would ever consider Beckett. Beckett as I don't think I would play Beckett as a 4 ever. I think it'd always be smuggling him to get that card advantage. So I basically treat him as a 5-cost, but I don't know. I haven't played it with Beckett a bunch. The couple of games that I have played with him, he didn't come up a bunch. Change of Heart, this is for other aggro decks, or for other control decks. Sometimes it's helpful, but I think usually you just want to remove their big thing rather than steal it for yourself. That's it just fits with the deck's game plan better. Emphas Nest is another weird thing that I've toyed with a couple times and just doesn't seem to be super impactful. Usually rather play Vigilance or Rivals Fall for 6. But there are scenarios where you would want Emphas Nest there. Evacuate I think is just bad in this deck. I think it's just a trap. 6 costs to bounce the whole board. It feels like what you would play that for is in aggro matchups where they've flooded the board and you just haven't been able to remove all their stuff, and then you still haven't removed all their stuff. It's just in their hand and you've set them back a few resources, which sometimes can be helpful, but realistically, it's not often that helpful, I think. So I guess mainly like a card that you would play out of desperation and wouldn't actually win you the matchup. But, you know, it's worth testing, I think. And then there's like more high-end stuff. So I have like Luke out of aspect, Crate Dragon out of aspect. Crate Dragon is just like an insane card. So I'd consider it, but it's not in there because it doesn't really fit with your game plan. Like you don't really want to be paying 11 for something. You know, and it is another legendary, and you just don't need it. Like you can win the game without it. And then I also have Snoke. You can't see him, but he's just like a really good card. I just don't think he fits the. I don't think he fits, you know, the next play style. Like generally, you want to be either winning with Avenger or winning by looping Vigilances. So, yeah, to all the haters that say Afra can't compete, she doesn't have enough support, she's not good enough, she'll get better with set 2, she's the Hera or IG-88 or Jin or Cassian of set 2, you're wrong. Afra is really good, she's a serious competitor, and I think if you're looking for a hard control deck to play right now, I think this is the one to beat. All right, thank you all, and remember to take the initiative.